Now it's time versus the Titan. The missing tourist submersible only has a few hours before the 5 passengers on board run out of oxygen. The search and rescue operation continues at a frantic pace, with rescuers honing in on repeated sounds of banging detected deep in the North Atlantic.
A rough wind and waves, though, proving to be a challenge for rescue teams. But more and heavier assets are amassing to quicken and widen the search before time runs out.
All right, for more on the efforts to find the missing submersible as the clock ticks down, let's speak now with Dr. Sal Mercogliano. He's an associate professor of maritime history at Campbell University, and he joins us from Bree Creek in North Carolina. Doctor, a lot of it doesn't look too good with time rapidly running out, but how hopeful are you of the news of the banging sounds being detected underwater? Do we still have a chance of finding the vessel and rescuing these people alive?
The sound gives you some optimism in this. The difficulty is you still have to locate where that sound is. And even once you locate the origination point of the sound, then you have to begin the rescue effort. And any rescue effort at this depth will involve time, whether it's attaching flotation bags to bring the submersible to the surface or trying to hoist it up by a winch of some kind. And so time is really the issue that's running out for the crew on board Titan.
Could you elaborate a bit more about this banging sound? How difficult is it to detect, and more importantly, how difficult is it to determine exactly where it is coming from? Do you think it's coming from the Titan submersible?
The report by the Coast Guard is it's a regular sound, which kind of gives you an indication that it may be man-generated. There's a lot of sounds in the ocean. You get a lot of debris and noise sounds, especially around the Titanic wreck. You could have nets banging against the side of the ship. You can hear a lot in the ocean. And the use of sonar, which is being used by the military right now, is really geared for more shallow water. Most military submarines operate at a depth of about 1,000 feet, 300 meters. We're talking about Titanic being at a depth of 3,800 meters, or about 13,000 feet. And sonar doesn't really operate very well down at that depth. And so even the intermittent sounding, you're going to need multiple sonars to basically triangulate where this is. And unfortunately, it sounds like the sounds are not being hit long enough or at a long enough duration to get a good fix on the position.
Mm. Doctor, reports and documents are slowly emerging of these multiple concerns raised over the safety of the vessel as well as the expedition. And how was it able to set off in the first place? And what does this tell you about regulatory environment for such submersibles?
Ships operate with a very strict regulatory environment around them. Ironically, it was the sinking of Titanic in 1912 that led to the Safety of Life at Sea Convention in 1914 that really put in place a lot of the rescue efforts that we see today, enough lifeboats, life preservers, the concept of 24-hour radio monitoring, signal devices. And unfortunately, where they're operating is out in international waters. These are not Canadian waters or American waters. And it seems as if Ocean Gate, the operator of the Titan, found themselves a gray zone to be operating in. The owner of the company decided not to have his submersible certified by an outside classification agency like ABS, the American Bureau of Shipping, or Lloyd's. And therefore, there was no second party that really ensured that they were following the requirements needed for a submersible. There's also an issue with Canada, since this vessel was a Canadian vessel they were launched from and they came from a Canadian port. What role did the Canadian authorities have in allowing this vessel to go out without any sort of certification?
With that in mind, then, there must be potential legal and regulatory implications of the submersible's disappearance. Tell us your thoughts on, how the industry can work with regulators, perhaps to ensure the safety of passengers and crew better than what has transpired here.
Most classification agencies are there for purposes of insurance, to provide that double check to make sure that companies are operating at the standards established usually by industry. And understand, submersibles are used worldwide. They're used in offshore drilling, they're used in cable laying and fiber optic cables. So they're used commonly, and there are practices. The American Bureau of Shipping, for example, has a 273-page document to ensure that submersibles operate according to regulations. This area really opens it up for more investigation. There'll be questions I have. Will the Canada and the United States implement laws further to regulate submersibles? Will the International Maritime Organization, the enforcement arm of the UN when it comes to shipping, want to see a requirement to modify SOLAS to incorporate submersibles into it and classify them as vessels?
And Doctor, this was an expedition aimed at the super rich, right? And they're promising to provide them with an unforgettable experience. And there, in fact, are other companies offering more affordable submarine excursions. I wonder, why are these trips popular, and what impact would this incident have on the broader deep dive or submarine tourism industry?
I think in many ways, undersea expeditions like this are akin to early aviation of the 20th century, where it was really in the hands of the governments and the super rich. But over time, it became safer. Regulations were put in place. You see submersibles used on a common basis for consumers in the Bahamas and throughout Asia and Europe. And I think one of the things that you're seeing here is they were operating in this international waterway, which in many ways has very few laws, especially after you launch this vessel into the ocean. And I think there'll be a time where, just like we board planes now, and we don't think for a moment about the safety when you fly 30,000 feet in the air, there'll be a time when we'll board submersibles and go down to 13,000 feet below the ocean and not think about it. We're just not there yet, because the ocean is a very unforgiving environment.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us this morning. Helps us put these things into context. Dr. Sal Mercogliano, there from Campbell University.